Like, how do you feel your campaign's going?
I feel it's really going well. My encounters with the public are almost invariably positive. I think in all the weeks and months that we've been going at this, I might have had 2 negative responses. Now, a lot of people may stay away because they're not going to vote for Bob Bratina, but the people that I do talk to seem to be very positive and seem to agree with the points that I bring up. So I feel confident, but all you can do in an election, because I've had 5 of them so far, is just work every day as hard as you can and see what happens on election day.
And why are you running for mayor? Like, you've done it all. And so what makes you feel like you compelled to come back? Is there some unfinished business?
Well, I thought I left the city in good shape. The 4-year term that I had, we got the stadium behind us built, and that was a disaster, and that's really the main reason why I ran at the time. Looked like we might even lose the Cats to another community. So we got the stadium done, and then shortly after that I got the West Harbor GO Station approved by Premier McGuinty. We finished the Randall Reef project. Just area rating, we had a unanimous vote with council on how to deal with that very controversial issue. So many good things happened, and I moved over to the federal as a member of parliament. I thought that it was a good opportunity for somebody new to come along, and then Mayor Eisenberger just chose to run again and won. So now we've had a few years of serious decline. Obviously, COVID contributed to that. But with the scandals, with the, leaving the sewer gate open for 4 years and the 26 or more millions of dollars to find out who said what to who as far as the slippery pavement is concerned, the administration is broken. So if I've got any life left in me as a politician, I'm going to spend it, hopefully, if I'm elected, as the next 4 years to get the city back on track.
Yeah, and so it does feel like some trust has been eroded a bit in council on how it operates. Kind of, the cover-up is always worse than the crime. How do you think you'd fix it if you're elected as mayor?
Well, the first thing is the administration, and the administration is overseen by the city manager. So it's not really, council had issues, of course, with how we got here. But the real thing is to look at the administrative side, and that's under the direction of the city manager. So I would have a long conversation with him or her, it's her right now, Jeanette Smith, to see if we can determine where the strengths are, where the weaknesses are, what we need to do to get things back on track and go from there. So that would be the first order of the day, is to deal with the administration, the management team, make sure that all the right people are in the right places.
And what are some of your focuses? Because I know you want to fix what's happened.
Yeah.
What do you want to be happening like in the future? What are some of your goals if you're elected?
Well, it's interesting to think about goals, because what I'd like to see is a kinder, gentler city, because there's so much angry rhetoric going now. We've had these protests in front of City Hall, and so toward that end, we need to bring back respect for law and order. We've heard too much about detasking or defunding the police when we know that we're understaffed. The Police Act calls for adequate and effective policing. Do we have the resources to do that in this very big and growing city? Well, the answer is no. Statistically, we're 50 or 60 officers short of where we should be, just on the median of other cities. So that would be the first thing, and I know that flies in the face of some other candidates who feel that they could move resources to something else. No, we need to go back to the kind of safety we had, I felt, when I was the mayor, because you saw officers walking in the core with yellow jackets, very visible, and on into the night. I'd be out for a walk in the evening at 10 o'clock, and I would see the police encountering issues along the way. So that would be a differentiation from me to the others. I want to see the police get the respect that they should have. I'd like to see them get back into the schools again. If there are bad apples, we've got to clean them out. But we have a diverse group. I know the chief is hiring, wants to bring more diversity into the police service, and we've got 30, 40, 50 more officers that we need to get to where we need to be to have a safer city. Because the final thing on that particular point is, out of the top 10 crime cities, the leading cities, number 1 is Surrey, number 10 is Brampton. We're 9th of all Canadian cities. There's Lethbridge in there, Red Deer, other cities, especially out west. That's nothing to be proud of.
Right. And a lot of those demonstrations out front, from what I remember outside City Hall, are people who are crying for help, like people who feel that, because Hamilton at one point, I think it was less than 5 years ago, you were mentioning like crime, 9th in the country. It led the country in hate crimes. A lot of new Canadians are coming here, a bit more affordable to live here than other spots. What are you going to do to make them feel safer, more welcome?
Well, increase visible policing. I've spoken to many of the different groups, you know, the Muslim groups, the Jewish community, the members of the black community, and there is concern about safety. And in terms of the number of hate crimes, the only thing that's positive is that we are investigating. I mean, statistics reflect what you're actually doing. So what that statistic, even as bad as it is, and it sounds, is that it is being addressed, but we still need more resources. And that includes surveillance of troublemakers. We've seen so many instances in nationwide or international news, terrible tragedies that occurred, and apparently people weren't aware that somebody, you know, had lots of guns in their home, or their behaviors were difficult. So part of the answer to that is to have the surveillance to find out these people before they act out their problems.
So surveilling these people who have a criminal past, or people who haven't done anything yet but they could? How do you?
Well, there you go. I mean, there are organizations who are dubious, and you know, I can't tell the police how to do their job, but certainly somebody has got a line on the potential for trouble, and that can come from neighbors, schools. You know, these people are acting out. I remember when I was in elementary school, there was one young person in our class who we all knew was going to get in trouble, and he eventually was convicted of murdering a policeman. So the information is out there, and I guess the other thing too is we have to open up as a community and say, you know what, if you see something, say something.
And you're talking about council and how it operated. There are going to be a bunch of new councils. A lot of councils are not coming back, but the ones that are currently in place, you mentioned how some of them may have been working along special interest groups. Like, what does that mean? What's a special interest group?
Well, a special interest group is not black entrepreneurs or the Muslim community. These are people, unelected people, who seem to think they're smarter than everybody else. They kind of have a social engineering, this is the way we think the city should run. A couple of things that they're especially strong on is detasking, defunding police. I hear that from that particular group. They seem to hate the automobile. And even driving down here, I had a few swerves because, you know, there's more obstacles that's being put into Main Street to slow traffic down. It frustrates drivers, and I think some of the, you know, the traffic calming so-called measures are actually causing frustration and poor driving, because you just can't seem to get around the city anymore the way you do. But the other thing that I think you could identify these so-called special interest groups is they don't debate issues. They don't discuss whether we should have traffic calming or not. They make personal attacks and insults. I was referred to by one of them as a clown whose day, you know, I should be in the dustbin of old politicians. You know, that we can't have that anymore. That kind of angry rhetoric coming from, in that case, an elected official, but also these behind the scenes folks. I mean, the social media is rife with those kinds of comments. And so that's what I'm referring to when I talk about that.
And so when you talk about, yeah, because they are putting a lot of bike lanes, protected bike lanes. If you were mayor, would you keep those? Would you continue that artery? Like, would you build more? Would you tear them down? What would you do?
Well, you have to assess the value of them. The worst one was when I had stopped it in my term as mayor, and then subsequently it went back in again, and that is the Hunter Street bike lane that goes in front of the GO Center. Why would you get off a GO train, and maybe you've come off Via from Toronto, and then you've taken GO and you got your suitcases, and it's snowing in January, and you got to cross 2 bike lanes and the road to get to the cabs which may be parked on the other side or wherever you're going. It does not make sense. And absolutely yesterday, there was a guy riding his bicycle on the other side, not in that bike lane. There's a bike rack in the station itself, in the GO station, and I've regularly taken that when I was an MP, taking the GO to Toronto to Union Station to take Via to Ottawa. I never saw more than 10 bicycles on that bike rack. So why is that there? And why would it be on that side of the street? Why would you block the entrance exit of a major transit hub with a bike lane? Can you imagine that in Union Station in Toronto? You pick the place. But it seems like the thing to do for the people who are so inclined. And you have to weigh all these things, use common sense, bring some reality to the picture. It's nice to say, yeah, we got bike lanes all over the place. What I would do as an improvement for cycling was I would put a gondola up and down the side of the hill. We used to have the inclines, of course, historically, but something like that would enable cyclists up the mountain, down the mountain, because I used to ride my bike from the Stone Church and Upper Ottawa to CHML when I worked there. Going down in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, no problem, but going back, I used to carry my bike up the stairs and then go back. So I think that a gondola would be a very effective way of solving that.
And Pittsburgh has a gondola.
Pittsburgh does, exactly.
The LRT, it's something that hasn't started building yet. They're doing all the work. The province says they got $1 billion. Do you want it? Doesn't seem like you do.
Well, I'm not going to oppose anything. It's the matter's in council's hands.
Right.
Okay, and it'll live and die based on the information that comes forward to council, because we don't have all the information yet. There's nobody that can tell me what the impact will be on the residential taxpayer. But if you want to take a wild guess, the Ottawa LRT operation and maintenance is $5 million a month. That's $60 million a year. That is a significant tax increase if that's a similar cost to the city of Hamilton. It would be 6-7% probably, something in that order. So we don't have those numbers. We don't know what they are, and we will be presented with them at some point. Up until now, though, Metrolinx hasn't been very forthcoming. We had big meetings with Phil Verster, and half of his answers were, well, get back to you on that. So we need to know that moving forward, but once again, I have one of 16 votes on council. It'll come before council and we'll make that decision. And if it's approved and everything goes forward, we'll do it right, because Ottawa's done it wrong, and Eglinton, they may have a public inquiry on that one as well, because it's just not going very well.
And the strong mayor's bill, that's something that it could come here. It's happening in Ottawa. Toronto, Ottawa doesn't want it. It's inevitable that it happens here, and at least that's what we think. I don't know what you think, but if it does happen, do you feel like your priorities align with the premier to make such a relationship possible? Yeah,
absolutely. I think the strong mayor is a good idea, because, you know, when I won in 2010, I won 12 of 15 wards, and I had over 50,000 votes. I have one vote, the same vote as everybody else. So what would the advantage be to a strong mayor system? The way I understand it, there may be the ability for the mayor to enter into the problem we discussed earlier, which is the administration. Could the mayor and the city manager discuss and deal with problems in the administration of the city? That's one thing. But on the other side of it, having the power is one thing, using it is another. So why would I not engage the council in issues that are important to the city, as opposed to just saying, well, the Premier says I can do this, so that's what I'm going to do. That's no way to show leadership. Right. So I would be working with my colleagues to determine whether the provincial directives are effective for the city.
And so part of that is to build housing quicker.
Yeah.
Like Hamilton, they shut down the boundary expansion. If you were mayor, would you remove that, work together to remove that to have more space to build?
I think we have to start with a blank sheet of paper. I protect farmland, absolutely. But in rural Hamilton, and it's 2/3 of our city is rural, I think there are plenty of opportunities to provide housing that would not impact on farmland. Within that area, there are other lands that aren't so valuable as farmland. Now, if you go up Upper Centennial, at the top of the hill, on the right-hand side is the Taro dump. On the left-hand side is an empty field. It used to be Speedway Park. You can still see the oval from the old racetrack that's on there. And then next to that is the DeFasco Recreation Center. And then next to that, there's other properties. The Croatian Club is up on that, off the road, off Green Mountain Road. So why couldn't you you're beside a 4-lane road, you've got recreation possibilities, because I think the city might even convince DeFasco to turn it over to a recreational facility for a new residential development in that area, because there's nothing growing on that land on the east side of Upper Centennial, on the other side of the Taro dump. Well, they've got houses going on the Taro side, but not that side. So I think my thing is, let's be realistic. Let's use common sense. Let's look at everything, and the provincial 50,000 houses by such and such, that's a guideline, that's not a rule. Because what we really, really need is new employment opportunities. We've got the possibility of 20 million square feet of new industrial space. It has to be serviced. But the problem, the reason our taxes are so high, is 87% of our taxes come from residential taxes, 13% from commercial industrial. Mississauga is 60-40. Hamilton, when I was a kid, when they had Otis Elevator, Westinghouse, you name Firestone, I'll bet it was closer to 50-50. We were a very wealthy community. Those have gone away. We've lost the opportunity. We've got to bring the potential for jobs back.
How do you do that? How do you bring those?
Well, they're waiting. There's 800 acres now that I just viewed on the old Stelco lands, and there's very exciting opportunities there. For instance, there's an opportunity to have a new shipping dock, and then there's an opportunity to bring the railway in and have an intermodal hub. And when you have when you're unloading containers, companies like to set up close by, because that's where the material is coming in, whatever it is, the supply chain. So the proximity on those lands means, and the proponents themselves are saying, they think there's maybe 8,000 jobs potential on the lands that we're talking about. So though we have to, as a city, look at how we're going to grow the employment base, the industrial base, for good paying jobs, as opposed to building a lot of housing that will simply be bedroom housing for people who are living in Toronto and want to have, maybe the house is a couple $100,000 cheaper than Toronto. Are we building a bedroom community, or are we reinvigorating the city as it was in the past with all of the jobs that were there, and those jobs giving the wages that enable people to buy the houses? So we have to do it all.
Right. And last one, you mentioned daycares. I couldn't believe it. There's only one City of Hamilton daycare?
Yeah.
Only one? So everything else is private? Or?
Private, yeah, exactly.
Really?
Well, and the $10 opportunity from the federal government hasn't been taken up by everybody. Yeah. So we have space, and even looking around across at the Bernie Morelli Center, the senior center, which is behind your camera, I'm thinking, for instance, that you could use the air rights, you could build a seniors residence over top of that. So I think that's underutilized space. Similarly, for the other end of the spectrum, which is our children, we need to use rec centers and other available spaces to provide the daycare that people need, and provide it through city, and make sure that every ward, and I think that that's a good goal that we could set for ourselves, by the end of the 4 years, has a city-run child care facility.
Yeah, that blows me away. All right. Anything else that I didn't mention that you want to?
We talked about this morning about recreation.
Yeah.
What I'd like to see is as many children as possible under the age of 18 being able to access whatever their recreational item it is, whether it's soccer, football, swimming, all of that, baseball. Mahoney Park is where I had that little discussion, where I played with Pat Quinn on our baseball team, the Ed Hare Dodgers of 1955, the Bantam champions of Mahoney Park. And Pat never forgot that. He actually endorsed me when I ran in 2010. But the point is, we have to keep our kids active. And of all of the benefits that brings to kids, you know, the teamwork, the camaraderie, discipline. Sports is a discipline. And I think kids sitting around not having anything to do is a prescription for a problem. So we got to keep those kids busy. Now, how are we going to pay for that? I think that we can create a community benefit from, for instance, if we look at the steel supply chain in Hamilton. If you take the top 10, I would have a meeting with them to say, could we, once we determine what the cost is, what few $1,000,000 a year, I'm not even sure what it is because it's hard to get that information, but would they be interested in joining together to have a steel chain fund that will provide recreation for every child in Hamilton? And I know that, you know, DeFasco has a charitable function. They have people who take applications and dole money out. So I think if we had a group of them together, National Steel Car, Stelco, DeFasco, Taylor Steel, there's so many of them, bring them all together in a room and say, look, here's the cost. Could we figure out, based maybe on your revenues, you know, annual, what your participation would be, and find money, because I think we're tapping out the tax side of things, and I really like the private sector to play a bigger role, which they do. I mean, the Bulldogs have a terrific program where they're feeding kids at St. Patrick's School, inner city kids. So I think give them the opportunity and let's see if we can work it. First thing we have to do is figure out what is the need, what is the cost. Second thing we have to do, how are we going to pay for it? Let's go to some of the big players in Hamilton and see if they can contribute.